A dream shattered. Jamal Brooks had worked tirelessly for years to build his business empire. He had started with nothing, and now he stood as a successful entrepreneur, owning a chain of upscale restaurants, a few tech ventures, and even a consulting firm that helped aspiring small business owners grow. His story was one of perseverance, grit, and sheer willpower. Jamal wasn't just a businessman. He was a testament to the power of hard work. He had long dreamed of owning a luxury sports car, a sleek, powerful machine that symbolized everything he had worked for: his determination, his success, and his journey from humble beginnings to a life of luxury. It wasn't just any car. It was a red Ferrari 488, the epitome of speed and class. Jamal had seen it on the road many times, the powerful engine roaring as it sped past him. Each time, his heart would race a little faster, and each time, he would remind himself, "One day, that car will be mine." That day came sooner than he expected. After months of researching, visiting dealerships, and analyzing his finances, Jamal decided it was time. He had enough savings, and his businesses were more than stable. He could finally afford the car of his dreams. He had built his fortune, and now it was time to reward himself. He dressed sharply that morning, as he always did before important meetings, wearing a tailored suit that exuded success and confidence. He knew this would be the day he walked into that prestigious dealership and made the purchase. He could already imagine the satisfaction of getting into the Ferrari, the thrill of the engine starting, and the feel of the leather seats as he drove away. With his mind set on this goal, Jamal drove to the dealership. The building stood tall, a glass and steel structure gleaming under the morning sun. The logo of the dealership was large and prominent, signaling to all that this was a place of luxury, a place for the wealthy, the successful, and the discerning buyer. Jamal parked his car near the entrance and, for a brief moment, allowed himself to feel a rush of excitement. He was here, and soon, that Ferrari would be his. As Jamal walked into the showroom, he couldn't help but notice how spacious it was, the marble floors reflecting the light from the high ceilings. The cars inside sparkled under the polished showroom lights, each one a work of art. But it was the Ferrari he was drawn to. The same model he had seen countless times on the roads, now standing in front of him in all its glory. The red paint flamed, and the sleek design made it look like a machine built for pure speed. Just as he was admiring the car, he was interrupted by a voice that cut through the air like a knife. "Excuse me, but this place isn't for you." Jamal turned around in disbelief, the voice coming from a security guard standing at the entrance. The guard was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a look of arrogance that immediately rubbed Jamal the wrong way. He hadn't even noticed the man approaching, and the words hit him like a cold slap in the face. "I'm sorry, what?" Jamal asked, his voice calm, though confusion mixed with a growing unease. "This dealership isn't for your kind," the guard said, eyeing him with disdain. He took a step closer, blocking Jamal's path. The expression on his face was one of superiority, as if Jamal were the one who didn't belong. Jamal's jaw tightened. He had faced discrimination before, but never so openly and boldly. He took a deep breath, willing himself to stay composed. This was his moment to prove that no one could stand in his way, no matter how they tried to tear him down. "I'm here to buy a car," Jamal said, keeping his voice steady. "I'd like to see the Ferrari." The guard snorted, a condescending smile forming on his lips. "Yeah, right. Cars like that aren't for you. You'd be better off looking at used cars somewhere else," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. He made no attempt to hide the judgment in his voice, as if Jamal was somehow unworthy of even looking at the car, let alone owning one. Jamal's hands clenched into fists, but he did his best to remain calm. He had worked too hard to let this man, or anyone else, stop him from achieving his dreams. He took a step forward, but the guard raised his hand and pushed him back. "I said you don't belong here," the guard growled, his voice becoming louder, attracting the attention of other employees who had started to gather around. Jamal stood frozen, shocked by the blatant racism and disrespect. But before he could respond, the dealership manager approached. The man had an air of arrogance about him, as if he were used to holding power over others. The manager's eyes immediately narrowed when he saw Jamal, and he glanced at the security guard as if to confirm something. Without a word, he turned his attention to Jamal. "Can I help you?" the manager asked, though the tone of his voice made it clear that he wasn't offering assistance. He was sizing Jamal up. "I'm here to buy the Ferrari 488, Jamal said, his frustration now mixing with a simmering anger. "I've done my research and I have the funds. I'd like to discuss the purchase." The manager scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Cars like that are for people who actually belong here, not for people like you," he said, his words sharp and biting. The employees behind him began to murmur among themselves, casting sideways glances at Jamal, their whispers filled with judgment and suspicion. "Why don't you head over to the used car lot, kid?" the manager continued, his voice dripping with mockery. "I'm sure there's something for you over there." Jamal's heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of hurt and anger threatening to explode. He had worked so hard to get here, and yet he was being treated like an intruder. He had known that racism still existed in the world, but he hadn't expected to encounter it so blatantly in a place like this, especially not in a place he was prepared to pay top dollar for a car. But Jamal wasn't the type of man to back down in the face of adversity. He had fought too many battles and overcome too many obstacles to let something like this stand in his way. "I'll be back," Jamal said, his voice cold and determined. He turned on his heel and walked out of the dealership, the laughter and whispers of the employees following him out the door. But Jamal wasn't defeated. This wasn't the end of his story. It was only the beginning. A moment of reflection. Jamal Brooks sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The engine hummed quietly as he stared ahead at the dealership, the bright showroom lights still flickering in his mind. His pulse was steady, but his thoughts were racing. A sharp wave of anger mixed with disbelief still surged through him. What had just happened? How had he been so openly humiliated? He glanced at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His sharp jawline and focused eyes stared back at him, but there was an unfamiliar weight in his gaze. It wasn't just the embarrassment or frustration. It was something deeper, something that had started to fester since the moment the security guard had blocked his path. He had felt the sting of prejudice, the harshness of a world that was quick to judge based on the color of his skin. And in that moment, as he sat there, he realized that this was no ordinary challenge. This was a test, one that would define how far he was willing to go for his dreams. Jamal had faced plenty of obstacles throughout his life, but this was different. This wasn't just about achieving financial success or growing his businesses. This was personal. This was about proving to the world, and to himself, that no one could dictate his worth, that no one could stop him from achieving his dreams. He wasn't just fighting for a car. He was fighting for something much bigger. His dignity, his right to exist in spaces where others like him had been excluded for far too long. He could hear the words of the security guard and the dealership manager echo in his head. "You don't belong here," they'd said. It was a statement that was supposed to diminish him, to remind him of the walls society had built to keep people like him out of places of power and privilege. But as he thought about it, the more it fueled him. Jamal Brooks didn't belong here. Fine. He would make sure that his presence would be undeniable. He took a deep breath, the weight of his thoughts settling into something sharper and more determined. Jamal had made it this far in life because he didn't back down from a fight. The road to success had been full of hard battles, and he had always come out victorious. This wouldn't be any different. He wasn't going to let the prejudice of a few individuals stop him from reaching his goals. The Ferrari, his symbol of success, would be his, whether they liked it or not. He started the car, pulling out of the parking lot and heading toward his office. There was work to be done, and he knew that in order to truly turn this situation into something positive, He needed to gather his resources and focus on the task at hand. The humiliation he felt in that moment would not define him. Instead, it would fuel his fire. The next few days were a blur of intense focus. Jamal threw himself into his work, using the frustration and anger from the incident as a motivator. He had built his businesses from the ground up, always with the mindset that there were no limits, no boundaries that couldn't be crossed. His latest venture, a new chain of high-end health and wellness centers, was picking up steam, and he poured his energy into making it a success. The media buzzed with excitement about his new projects, and his name began to appear in more and more high-profile business circles. People were starting to take notice. Jamal was no longer just a successful businessman. He was becoming an icon. But in the back of his mind, the image of the dealership, the laughter of the employees, and the sneering expressions of the manager and security guard haunted him. He couldn't shake it. It wasn't about the car anymore. It wasn't even about the people at the dealership. It was about breaking down the barriers, showing that someone like him, someone who had worked hard, someone who had earned every penny, was worthy of respect, no matter where he walked. Jamal didn't just want to return to the dealership. He wanted to own it. Not literally, of course, but figuratively. He wanted to take what had happened and turn it into a movement. He wanted to show the world that racism, prejudice, and exclusion would no longer dictate who could occupy spaces of power and success. As Jamal sat at his desk one evening, overlooking the city skyline, he thought about how he could make his dream a reality. He could buy the car, but he could also do so much more. He could prove that his success wasn't just about wealth or status. It was about breaking down walls. He wanted to become an example for others, particularly young Black entrepreneurs, that they too could walk into any room and claim their space. No one could stop them. The phone rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a call from his lawyer, Karen, who had worked with him for years and knew his drive better than anyone else. "Jamal, I've been following up on some of the legal aspects of your new wellness center," Karen began, "but I also came across something interesting. There's an opportunity to purchase a stake in that luxury car dealership you visited the other day. It's a small one, but it could be a strategic move. Why do I mention this? Well, I did some digging, and the owner is getting ready to sell." Jamal leaned forward in his chair, a glint of interest in his eyes. Really? He had no idea Karen would be able to pull something like this off. He thought for a moment, then leaned back in his chair, his mind beginning to race. "Yes," Karen continued. "It's a family-owned business, but the current owner is looking to retire. It's small, but it's lucrative. And more importantly, the reputation of the dealership could use a serious overhaul." Jamal smiled, a slow, calculated grin that spoke volumes about his determination. "I'm in. Let's do it. I'm going to buy into that dealership." Karen was silent for a moment, clearly surprised by his sudden decision. "You're serious? You're not just going to let it go?" "No," Jamal replied firmly. "I'm going to make sure that dealership reflects the kind of world I want to see, a world where anyone, no matter their background or their skin color, is treated with respect. And I'll make them regret treating me like that. They'll see the power of persistence. They'll see what it means when someone refuses to be sidelined." The conversation ended with Karen agreeing to move forward, and Jamal knew that this was the first step toward making a difference. He wasn't just going to buy the Ferrari. He was going to buy into the dealership, become part of the system, and shake things up from the inside out. As he walked out of his office that night, Jamal felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had ever felt before. He wasn't just fighting for a car. He was fighting for change, for representation, for equality. And this time, he wasn't just going to be a customer. He was going to be a force to be reckoned with. A bold move. The weeks following Jamal's decision were filled with a new sense of purpose. His life had always been centered around achieving success, but now his mission had taken on a different, more personal significance. This wasn't just about achieving personal goals or increasing his financial portfolio. It was about something deeper. It was about challenging the status quo and making a statement. Jamal wasn't just aiming for success. He was now working to change perceptions, break barriers, and prove that anyone, no matter their background or their skin color, could walk into any space and claim it as their own. In the days following his conversation with Karen, Jamal threw himself into learning everything he could about the luxury car dealership he planned to invest in. He spent hours researching the business's history, its owners, its clientele, and its financial standing. The dealership had been around for decades, but it had never truly expanded beyond a small wealthy clientele. It catered mostly to those who had the right connections and the right social standing, a place where people like Jamal weren't exactly welcome. He was determined to change that. Jamal wasn't just looking to buy a stake in the business for personal gain. He saw this as an opportunity to bring a new vision into an old, outdated establishment. He wanted to reshape the way luxury and exclusivity were perceived. He wanted the cars on the showroom floor to reflect a broader range of people who had earned their place through hard work, grit, and determination, just like him. He wanted the dealership to be a symbol of inclusion, where anyone with the means could walk through the door, no matter their race, background, or financial status. But he knew it wasn't going to be easy. Jamal began to attend meetings with Karen and his financial advisors, mapping out a strategy to acquire a significant share of the business. His approach was methodical, careful, and calculated. He didn't want to rush into anything. He needed to ensure that this was the right move. As Jamal worked tirelessly on the acquisition process, his mind continued to circle back to the moment he had walked out of that dealership. He had been humiliated, yes, but he had also seen the cracks in the system. He could feel the walls that separated people like him from the luxury and success they deserved. And now he was going to tear those walls down. Every night after his meetings, Jamal would sit in his office, reviewing business plans and potential partnerships, imagining what it would feel like to finally take control of a space that had long been closed off to people like him. He envisioned himself walking through the dealership doors, not as a customer, but as an owner. He imagined walking past the same security guard who had thrown him out, this time in a tailored suit, a look of quiet authority in his eyes. The guard's face would be full of confusion, perhaps even regret. But Jamal wouldn't gloat. He wouldn't need to. His presence would speak volumes. Days turned into weeks, and the deal slowly began to come together. Jamal made a number of bold moves, shifting his investments to include a sizable sum for the dealership, strengthening his network with the right people, and ensuring that he could leverage his influence in the business world to make the acquisition possible. As the process gained momentum, Jamal grew more confident. He was no longer simply a successful entrepreneur with dreams of a car. He was becoming a symbol of perseverance and change. But his resolve would soon be tested in ways he hadn't anticipated. One afternoon, as Jamal was preparing for yet another strategy meeting with Karen, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his assistant, who had been monitoring the progress of the acquisition. The message was short, but enough to stop Jamal in his tracks. The dealership owner just pulled out of the deal. He's reconsidering selling. Jamal stared at the phone for a moment, disbelief taking root in his chest. How could this be happening? He had been so close. Everything had been going according to plan. He quickly called Karen, his mind racing. "Karen, what's going on? Why would the owner back out now?" he asked, his voice a mix of frustration and confusion. Karen's voice was calm but filled with concern. "I don't have all the details yet, but it seems the owner has received a better offer from another buyer. And from what I'm hearing, that buyer is looking to take the dealership in a different direction, one that might not align with your vision." Jamal could feel his heart race. The idea that his dreams could be slipping through his fingers just when he was about to make the most significant impact was more than he could bear. But he refused to let himself fall victim to despair. He had worked too hard, fought too many battles, and made too many sacrifices to let this setback define him. "No, this deal isn't over. We're not backing down," Jamal replied firmly, his voice steady and filled with purpose. "We're going to make them see why my vision is the one they need." Jamal knew that if he wanted to make this happen, he needed to do more than just play the business game. He had to make a statement, one that couldn't be ignored. He wasn't just a businessman trying to buy into a dealership. He was a man who had faced discrimination and prejudice his entire life. And now he was going to take that struggle and turn it into something powerful. That evening, Jamal put together a plan. He wasn't going to wait for the owner to reconsider. He was going to make sure the owner understood just how badly Jamal wanted this, and more importantly, why he was the best choice. He reached out to his network of business leaders and influential figures, including people who had long admired his work ethic and determination. Jamal knew that if he could rally enough support, he could convince the dealership owner that his vision wasn't just a good business move, it was the right moral move. The next few days were filled with phone calls, meetings, and negotiations. Jamal was relentless. He had to be. This was more than just an opportunity to buy into a business. It was his chance to create real, lasting change. He wasn't going to let a few obstacles stop him from accomplishing something bigger than himself. And as the days wore on, Jamal could feel the tide starting to turn in his favor. Slowly but surely, the tide of the acquisition began to shift. The dealership owner, who had initially hesitated, began to see the potential benefits of selling to someone like Jamal. Someone who wasn't just looking to expand his empire, but who had the drive and determination to challenge the system and bring a new, inclusive approach to luxury car sales. Jamal's vision was clear, and it was starting to resonate. He wasn't just another wealthy businessman. He was a symbol of perseverance, a living testament to the power of resilience. And now, the owner was beginning to see that Jamal's approach could bring a new kind of prestige to the dealership, one that wasn't based on exclusion, but on inclusion and respect. But even as the deal started to look more promising, Jamal knew that there was still more work to do. He wasn't just going to buy into the dealership, he was going to own it in every sense of the word. This wasn't just a financial investment. It was a mission to change the way people thought about success, wealth, and opportunity. It was time for him to make his mark. The tide turns. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jamal threw himself into the acquisition process, managing every detail with precision and care. He had always prided himself on being hands-on with his businesses, never leaving anything to chance, and this was no different. Every aspect of the dealership's operations was scrutinized. Financial statements, employee satisfaction, client demographics, and of course, the brand image. Jamal knew that if he was going to make his mark, he needed to approach this not just as an investment, but as an opportunity to redefine what luxury and success meant in the world of high-end automobiles. The dealership owner, who had initially seemed hesitant, was now beginning to warm up to Jamal's vision. Jamal's persistence, his network of influential business leaders, and his clear, unwavering stance on inclusivity and progressiveness were starting to sway the owner's opinion. He wasn't just another rich buyer. He was someone who had earned his wealth through hard work and had the vision to make that wealth work for something more than personal gain. The dealership owner, a man in his late 60s named Harold West, had built the business from the ground up, but he had always maintained an air of exclusivity. Now, as he saw the potential in Jamal's ideas, he was beginning to see a way forward that would ensure the business thrived in the 21st century. One evening, as Jamal was reviewing some final numbers with Karen, his phone rang. It was Harold. Jamal's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He answered the call. "Jamal," Harold began, his voice carrying a weight of finality. "I've been thinking long and hard about this. I see your vision now. I see the potential for change. I'm willing to sell, but this won't be easy. There are a lot of people in this business who won't like the direction you're proposing. Some of them are already questioning my decision. But if you want it, the deal is yours." Jamal leaned back in his chair, taking a moment to process the news. He had anticipated resistance, but hearing Harold's words confirmed just how significant this was. His dreams, his mission to change the way people thought about success, were finally within his grasp. But Jummel knew that getting the deal wasn't the end of the battle. It was just the beginning. There would be hurdles to overcome, people to convince, and systems to dismantle. "I'm ready, Harold. I won't let you down," Jummel said, his voice calm but filled with the determination that had defined him for years. "Let's make this happen." The next few days were filled with paperwork and final negotiations, but Jummel was confident. He was on the verge of something monumental, not just for himself, but for people like him who had been excluded from opportunities simply because of who they were. As the deal officially went through, Jummel took a moment to reflect. He wasn't just buying into a business, he was buying into a dream. A dream that had started years ago, when he first decided to step away from a life of mediocrity and start building something of his own. This wasn't about revenge or retribution. This was about change. This was about proving that people like him could not only belong in spaces where they had been told they didn't belong, but could dominate those spaces and reshape them for future generations. The first day after the deal closed, Jummel walked into the dealership as the new co-owner. It was early morning, and the dealership was still quiet. The hum of the overhead lights and the soft shuffling of employees, the only sounds in the expansive showroom. The cars, shiny, pristine, and untouched, seemed to glow under the bright lights. But Jummel wasn't looking at the cars. His eyes were on the employees who were just beginning their shifts. He had seen this place through the eyes of an outsider, but now, as an insider, he was prepared to change everything. The security guard, the same one who had thrown him out weeks before, was standing by the entrance. Jummel could feel his gaze before he even reached the door. The man's posture stiffened when he saw Jummel approach. Jummel's heart pounded, but this time, it wasn't from anger or frustration. It was from anticipation. He walked directly toward the guard, his steps purposeful, every inch of him exuding calm confidence. "Good morning," Jummel said, his voice low but steady. The guard looked at him, recognition slowly dawning in his eyes. Jummel could see the confusion flicker across the guard's face as he tried to reconcile the man who had been thrown out just a few weeks ago with the man standing before him now, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, carrying the unmistakable air of authority. "Sir, you're—" the guard stammered, clearly unsure how to react. Jummel smiled, but it wasn't a smile of mockery. It was a smile that radiated power and resolve, a smile that said, "I belong here. I've always belonged here. Yeah, it's me, Jummel Brooks." "The new owner," Jummel said, his tone cool and businesslike. He didn't need to elaborate. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The guard's face turned a deep shade of red, but Jummel didn't wait for an apology. Instead, he turned and walked past him, heading straight into the showroom. He could feel the weight of eyes on him. Employees, customers, all watching as he made his way to the desk where Harold was waiting for him. Harold stood up when Jummel entered the room, his face showing signs of stress, mixed with reluctant admiration. "Jummel," he said, extending his hand. "It's official now. The place is yours." Jummel took Harold's hand firmly, but his eyes didn't stay on the older man for long. His gaze swept over the room, scanning the faces of the employees who had been there that day, the ones who had watched him walk out in humiliation. There was no sense of smugness in his demeanor. Instead, he gave them a simple nod of acknowledgement, the kind of nod that signified his arrival, his permanence in this space. He wasn't here to take anything away. He was here to build something. Over the next few days, Jummel set to work. He spent hours meeting with the dealership's employees, salespeople, managers, and even the service staff. He had a vision, and he made sure everyone knew what it was. He wasn't just another rich businessman looking to make a quick profit. He was here to change the culture, to create a place where people felt welcome, no matter their background. Jamal introduced new policies, focusing on inclusivity, diversity, and training for employees on cultural sensitivity. He started a community outreach program, offering scholarships and mentorships for young people interested in pursuing careers in the automotive industry, particularly those from underserved communities. Within weeks, the atmosphere of the dealership began to shift. The customers who once hesitated to step through the door now felt welcome. The employees, many of whom had been skeptical at first, began to embrace the new vision. Word started to spread, not just through the local community, but in the business world as well. Jamal wasn't just a businessman. He was a force for change, a person who was willing to challenge the system and make it better for everyone. But Jamal knew that this was just the beginning. He wasn't satisfied with simply changing the dealership's culture. He had his sights set on something bigger. He had a new dream now, not just of owning a Ferrari, but of owning a network of businesses that would redefine the standards of luxury, success, and equality. And as he stood in the showroom, watching the team he had worked so hard to build take shape, he knew that nothing could stop him now. Rising above. As the months passed, Jamal Brooks found himself not just adapting to his new role as the co-owner of the luxury dealership, but thriving in it. The transformation within the dealership was undeniable. The energy had shifted from one of exclusivity and indifference to one of warmth and inclusivity. He was no longer just an outsider looking in. He was now in control, shaping the business and the culture that surrounded it. The tension that once clouded the atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of respect for Jamal, for the employees, and for the vision he had brought to life. But even as things began to improve within the dealership, Jamal knew that the journey ahead would be far from easy. Success, he had learned, wasn't something that could be measured solely by the deals you closed or the money you made. Success, in its truest form, was about impact. It was about using the platform you had built to challenge norms, dismantle prejudices, and create a space for others to thrive. Jamal wasn't interested in being just another wealthy businessman. He wanted to be the man who reshaped the future for those who had been overlooked, just like he once had been. With the dealership steadily improving, Jamal turned his attention outward, focusing on expanding his influence. He had already made a name for himself in the business world, but now he wanted to be known for more than just his financial acumen. Jamal began speaking at events and conferences, sharing his story of overcoming adversity and breaking through barriers. He was determined to inspire others, especially young Black entrepreneurs who might feel discouraged by the systemic obstacles in their path. Jamal had never forgotten the sting of discrimination, and now he used it as fuel to inspire others to keep pushing, no matter the odds stacked against them. One such opportunity came when Jamal was invited to speak at a prestigious business summit. The event was held in a grand hall, filled with top-tier executives and influential figures from various industries. The stage was set for a keynote speaker who would deliver a message that could potentially change the trajectory of the lives of those who attended. Jamal, however, was nervous, not because he doubted his abilities or his message, but because he understood the power that his words could have. He wasn't just standing up there to talk about his success. He was about to speak about something deeper, about the journey that had led him to this very moment. The day of the summit arrived, and Jamal took to the stage with the same poise and confidence he had cultivated over the years. As he stood before the crowd, he could feel the weight of their eyes on him, some filled with curiosity, others with skepticism. Jamal had learned long ago that the world was quick to judge, to place people in boxes based on superficial things. But he also knew that he had something far more valuable than his appearance. He had a story, a powerful narrative of resilience, perseverance, and triumph. "Good afternoon," Jamal began, his voice steady and commanding. "I'm here to tell you that there is no such thing as a limit, not in business, not in life, and certainly not in who we can become." He paused for a moment, allowing the room to absorb his words. The quiet was palpable, but Jamal could feel the anticipation building. "I didn't start out with privilege. I didn't inherit wealth. and I didn't have connections to get my foot in the door. But I had something more powerful: persistence, and I had the ability to turn setbacks into stepping stones. You see, it's not the obstacles that define us. It's how we respond to them that shapes who we are and where we end up. Jamal's words resonated with the crowd. He spoke not just to the business elite in the room, but to everyone who had ever been told they couldn't achieve something because of who they were or where they came from. Jamal's voice was a beacon of hope, a reminder that success was earned, not given. He spoke about the moment he had walked into that dealership, his dream car in sight, only to be humiliated because of the color of his skin. He spoke about the resolve that had kept him going, the fire that had burned within him, propelling him to change the very system that had once tried to exclude him. As he continued, Jamal shared his journey of acquiring the dealership, not just as a financial transaction, but as a symbolic act of breaking down the walls of prejudice and exclusivity. He talked about the work he had done to transform the culture of the business, creating an environment where everyone, regardless of background, felt welcome and respected. He spoke about the importance of representation in spaces of power and influence, how his presence as a black entrepreneur in a traditionally white-dominated industry wasn't just about his personal success, but about paving the way for others to follow. The audience sat in rapt attention, moved by his words. The impact was undeniable. Jamal's story wasn't just inspiring. It was a call to action. It was a reminder that no matter the obstacles, no matter the resistance, there was always a way forward. And Jamal had found it. After the summit, the response was overwhelming. Invitations to speak at other events flooded in. Jamal's name became synonymous with success, resilience, and transformation. He became a mentor to aspiring entrepreneurs, particularly those from underrepresented communities. His story became a beacon of hope, lighting the way for others who had been overlooked or dismissed by society. But even as Jamal's reputation grew, he never lost sight of his original mission: to make the dealership not just a place of business, but a place of empowerment. He worked tirelessly, meeting with employees, customers, and community leaders, ensuring that the dealership remained true to its new vision. He invested in community outreach programs, working to bridge the gap between luxury markets and the underserved communities that had long been excluded from them. As Jamal's business empire expanded, so did his influence. He used his platform to advocate for greater diversity in corporate leadership, pushing for policies that supported equal opportunities for all. He partnered with educational institutions to create scholarships for students interested in pursuing careers in the automotive industry, helping to nurture the next generation of leaders and innovators. But there was one thing Jamal had never forgotten: the moment of humiliation, the moment when he was thrown out of that dealership simply because of who he was. It had been a painful experience, but it had also been a turning point, a catalyst for the man he had become. It was a reminder that the fight for equality wasn't over, that there was still work to be done. One evening, as Jamal sat in his office overlooking the city, he received a call from Karen. The dealership had been experiencing a surge in sales, but more importantly, the culture within the business had shifted in ways that were truly remarkable. Customers from all walks of life were coming in, not just to buy cars, but to experience a new kind of luxury, one that was accessible, inclusive, and rooted in respect. The community outreach programs were flourishing, and Jamal was becoming a household name not just for his success, but for his commitment to change. "You did it, Jamal," Karen said, her voice filled with pride. "You've created something real here, something that's going to last." Jamal smiled, but he wasn't satisfied. His work was far from done. He had proven that one person could make a difference, but he knew that there were still many more barriers to break, many more walls to tear down, and he was ready for the next challenge: a legacy reimagined. As Jamal Brooks stood in the heart of the dealership, surveying the showroom full of customers, employees, and gleaming vehicles, he couldn't help but feel a profound sense of pride. This wasn't just a business anymore. It had become a symbol a symbol of resilience, inclusion, and a future where barriers were no longer tolerated. What had once been a place of exclusion had transformed into a beacon of hope for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Jamal had spent years building his empire, and with each new business venture, each success, he had solidified his place in the world of entrepreneurship. But this dealership, it meant something deeper. It wasn't just about the money, the luxury cars, or even the power. It was about breaking through a system that had long been set up to exclude people like him, people who didn't fit the mold of what society deemed acceptable or worthy of success. It was about leaving a legacy that would inspire generations to come, a legacy that showed the world what was possible when people dared to dream big and fought relentlessly to make those dreams a reality. The transformation had been profound, not just for the dealership, but for Jamal as well. He had gone from the man who had been humiliated at the dealership to the one who now stood at the helm, making decisions, shaping the direction of the company, and ensuring that no one else would ever feel the sting of prejudice like he had. He had seen firsthand the impact of his changes, the way employees who once felt voiceless now spoke up with confidence, the way customers who had been hesitant to enter now came in with a sense of belonging. And perhaps most importantly, he had seen the way his actions had inspired other entrepreneurs, particularly those from marginalized communities, to take risks, to push forward, and to claim spaces they had previously been denied. Yet, as he walked through the dealership on a typical busy afternoon, he could sense that there was still much work to be done. There were still people in the community who saw his success as a threat, still those who clung to outdated ideas of who belonged in certain spaces. Despite all the progress, there were still whispers behind closed doors, still subtle prejudices lurking beneath the surface. But Jamal knew that he couldn't change everyone's mind overnight. All he could do was continue proving that his place in this world was earned, and that he wouldn't stop pushing until others had the same opportunities. The shift wasn't just about people of color or marginalized communities. It was about creating an environment where everyone felt seen and respected. It was about showing the world that true luxury wasn't about exclusivity. It was about opportunity. And Jamal believed that if you made room for others, everyone would thrive. He had always believed in the power of community, in the power of uplifting those around you to rise to their full potential. As he stood at the front of the showroom that afternoon, Jamal's attention was drawn to one of the new sales associates. Her name was Leah, and she had started working at the dealership just a few months ago. Leah had grown up in a tough neighborhood, with little exposure to the world of luxury cars and high-end business practices. But Jamal had seen something in her that most people had overlooked: an innate drive, a hunger to learn, and a desire to succeed against the odds. He had personally mentored her, offering guidance and support as she found her footing in the business. Leah approached him, a smile on her face as she handed him a file. "Jamal," she said, her voice steady but filled with gratitude, "I just wanted to thank you. You've given me an opportunity I never thought I'd have. I don't know where I'd be without this job, and I certainly wouldn't be in a place where I could see myself owning something like this one day." Jamal smiled at her words, his heart swelling with pride. Leah wasn't the first person he had mentored in the dealership, and she certainly wouldn't be the last. But hearing her say those words reminded him of the true value of his work, the difference it made in people's lives. Leah wasn't just selling cars anymore. She was breaking down barriers, creating a path for others who felt like they didn't belong in places of power and privilege. "It's all you, Leah," Jamal said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did the hard work. All I did was make sure you had a chance to show what you're capable of. You're the one who's going to keep pushing, keep rising." Leah nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. "I won't forget what you've done for me. I'm going to make sure others get the same chance." That conversation stayed with Jamal long after Leah had returned to her duties. He realized that this, right here, was the true legacy he was building. It wasn't just about changing the dealership or the automotive industry. It was about changing lives, about giving people opportunities they never thought they would have. It was about giving them the confidence to walk into spaces that had been closed off to them, to claim their worth and prove to the world that they belonged. But as Jamal sat back in his office later that evening, he found himself contemplating the bigger picture. He had accomplished so much in his life, and while he was proud of the dealership's success, he knew that his influence had only just begun to ripple outward. He had been given a platform, a position of power, and he was determined to use it for good. Jamal began to think about how he could scale his impact. He knew that a single dealership could only do so much to change an entire industry. If he truly wanted to make a lasting difference, he needed to think bigger. He needed to create a network, a coalition of like-minded business leaders, entrepreneurs, and activists who were committed to changing the face of industries that had long been dominated by exclusion and privilege. And so, he began planning his next move. He would start a foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping young people from underprivileged communities break into industries like automotive sales, business, and entrepreneurship. The foundation would offer scholarships, mentorship programs, and internships at companies that embraced diversity and inclusion. His vision was to create a pipeline of talent from communities that had long been ignored, giving them the tools and opportunities to succeed. Jamal's mind raced with possibilities. His goal wasn't just to make money or gain more power. It was to create a network of opportunities that would empower people to build their own empires, just like he had done. He wanted to help them become leaders, innovators, and change-makers in their own right. He began to reach out to business leaders, philanthropists, and community organizers to help him turn this vision into reality. The support was overwhelming. People were eager to join him, to help build something that would leave a lasting impact on the world. Jamal knew that this foundation, this initiative, would be the pinnacle of his legacy. It wouldn't just be about what he had accomplished. It would be about what he had enabled others to achieve. As Jamal's foundation began to take shape, he continued to lead the dealership, ensuring that it remained true to the principles he had instilled from the very beginning. The business was thriving, but more importantly, it was changing lives. And now, with the foundation in motion, Jamal was finally realizing the full extent of his dreams. He wasn't just building a business empire, he was building a movement that would continue to grow, continue to empower, and continue to redefine what success meant for generations to come.